Welcome to OverBoost 18. OverBoost is a podcast interview series featuring discussions with speedrunners about their history in speedrunning and gaming and the runs they're passionate about. I am your host, PMC Trilogy, and with me today is Maxylobes. Maxi, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, I'm really excited this because we are, you might not know this, but we are members of a very important club, which is the club of people who have prevented KZ Frew from holding on to any world records.
That's true, actually.
It's very true. It's an elite brotherhood. Very, very glad to talk to you. Had to lead off with that one. But I always like to start with something recent, and something that I noticed that you did recently that I wanted to get your take on was I noticed you had done some streaming and speedrunning with the Dread X collection. And I find it, indie games have been getting, progressively bigger, I think, now for a decade, going back to things like, Spelunky or stuff like that. But now I feel like they're getting much more sophisticated in their presentation. And I wanted to ask you, as a speedrunner and streamer, how do you feel about the sort of role and position that indie games take in what you do as a speedrunner?
So, indie games usually provide something a little bit more niche outside of the bigger games, which sometimes leads me to trying them out. Like, take for instance the Convenience Store. Really short indie horror game by a couple of, Japanese developers. And it's just a really quick, 20-minute run, but it's got some really cool tech that you may see in a couple of the other big games out there in the horror genre, but not that many. Like, you take a bento box and you mash pick up and drop, and you float on top of it to get out of bounds. It's like, what other game are you going to use a bento box to do that? That's sick. So indie games do provide something that, out of the norm. But as a streamer, something like Dread X Collection is really nice because it's 12 games all created by different devs in a week, really short games. They're pretty rough around the edges, but some of them have really cool concepts and they're really just interesting little projects. And as a streamer, it's kind of nice to play those types of indie horror games as opposed to some of the other indie horror games out there that try to take themselves a little too seriously. Whereas this one, Dread X Collection 2 doesn't take itself too seriously. There's a couple of games that are very much so just kind of, shoot the shit, have fun. And yeah, I like that. I tried to give it a go in speedrunning, but some of the games are a little too long and a little too rough. So I kind of just did it once just to know, because you're not going to know unless you try, right? So I tried it out, and I'm not going to do it again, but I'm glad I gave it a shot. And it's still a really good time casually. And I think as a streamer, I think a lot of horror streamers out there do tend to dabble in the indie genre, whether it's good or bad games, because it's just another interesting take. I think indie games outside of the horror genre, I definitely like a lot of them. In fact, I think most of the indie games that I've played outside the horror genre I've liked quite a bit. But as a speedrunner, I don't think I've really taken up many indie games outside of horror. So yeah, I might need to change that soon.
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like when I think of indie games that I've seen for speedrunners, I feel like I think of three genres, which is FPS, some of the stuff like Dusk or things like that, and then 2D and 3D platformers, which I know are out there because I've even run into devs like Hat in Time and things like that, but which I'm less familiar with compared to that. But I think what you said about things that lean into having an inventive concept are really great for just a one-off stream. I think they really, really lend themselves well to that. Whether or not they're speedrun friendly, oftentimes what you said is correct. You don't know until you try. But oftentimes, that concept isn't necessarily going to relate to a speedrun. But then sometimes you do get a fun thing like the Convenience Store.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, what you said about 2D and 3D platformers, I think those, in terms of indie games, some of those games like Celeste, they take off. There's so many runners just instantly. And it's really cool to see. And even little games like Defunct, like even tiny, like, 3-minute speedruns. Those developers are probably like, not many people are going to try to play this game. And it's like, no, you've got hundreds of people trying to beat it quick. So,
has to be gratifying for sure. That's also, that's another part of it too, actually, before we get off this subject and dig into your history. Do you ever find yourself trying to make contact with any devs?
I've tried. I think it would be easier with like the indie developers, but I've actually tried and I've succeeded with a couple, mostly from Monolith.
Oh yeah, same.
Yeah.
I think we're both in the Monolith developer Discord or the dev Discord.
Yeah, they're really nice. They're super cool, and they'll shoot the shit if they got the time. It's really cool of them. And I think Fear and Condemned mostly. I've talked to some of those people who worked, and they're just super supportive.
All right, well, let's go back in time and figure out where do things start for you? Is gaming something that comes from family or friends or some other story?
I suppose like my first introduction to video games was when I was 4, and I was still living in England at the time because I was born in England. I was from London.
I've been on a streak now of 4 weeks. I thought I had broken my streak of UK interviews, and apparently secret UK interview. Did not realize.
Yeah, you wouldn't be able to tell because I've grown up in Southern Cali, so it's yeah. But anyways, when I was 4, my sister was at her boyfriend's house meeting, and my parents were meeting his parents, and I went with. And he had Tomb Raider 2 on his PC. And he was just like, here, mess around with this for a little bit. And I had no idea what I was doing. Because I was, small and completely unaware of what was going on. So I was messing around and got nowhere, of course. I died to the first tiger over and over again. But hey, it was a cool concept and I was involved. It was cool to see and just fiddle around with the keyboard. So my mom and dad were like, okay, well, he seemingly enjoys this. It's cool. Let's get him a PlayStation. So I got a PlayStation, and my first games were Street Fighter Alpha 2, Crash Bandicoot, the Batman Forever arcade game, and Disney's Hercules. And that is what I started my gaming experience on the PlayStation when I was 4. And I suppose the next year and a half was just me kind of sitting there playing those same games over again, probably losing in the same spots because some of those games are hard. The Batman Forever arcade game was messed up, and Street Fighter Alpha 2 AI is, okay. But I moved to Southern California, and I also had my PlayStation again, and picked up a couple more games and started to slowly get more into it. I remember some of the games that I really liked were like Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, and like, of course, those are mechanically a little bit more advanced than some games. Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2 and 3 specifically. So I think I started off with a lot of variety in terms of gaming, and that kind of just broadened my horizons. I got like a Dreamcast. I never had an N64, so I missed out on all of that. My neighbor had an N64, so I'd always want to go to his house to go play banjo, but whatever. I had a Dreamcast, so he wanted to come over and play Soul Calibur, because, Dreamcast was ahead of its time. But I think I slowly got more, like, passionate about gaming when I was probably around, like, 13, 14, because I'm pretty sure that's when the PS3... the Xbox 360, like, those were big. That was a big time for gaming, and I was like, yo, I'm fully into this. I want to do this, like, every day. This is just too much fun.
Would that have been the point where like you really like sort of took ownership? Because I feel like one inflection point that I love asking people about is when it sort of transitions from something that, like, you said your parents saw that you were interested in it as a small child, and were like, all right, let's start gifting this to them. And then at some point, and this, I feel like this is kind of what you're going to, you start really taking ownership of it to the point where, maybe when you get your first job or something like that, you get, now it's really your 360. It's not a shared 360. No one else. It's no siblings can play this 360 or something like that.
Right, yeah. I did started, I think that was more so around like the age 16, 17. I think that's the age when I started taking like serious ownership over like all of my gaming equipment. I started even like collecting games that I just didn't have access to easily. Like that's when I started getting into survival horror. That was when I bought like the Resident Evil games, the Silent Hill games, Fatal Frame games. I would like look up retro stores near me and like which GameStops could possibly have these games, and that's when I started taking stuff super seriously. Not as like a video game collector, but I did try to go out of my way to find games that I was interested in that weren't easily, accessible at like my local store. So,
do you find yourself now with like a pretty valuable collection? Because I feel like, right now in the year of our Lord 2020, especially, we're going to be talking about some horror games. Those are some of the most expensive games on PlayStation 2.
I have a couple. I think the most expensive games that I have right now are Resident Evil 2 on Dreamcast and Resident Evil 2 and 3 on GameCube. Like, those go for a pretty penny, but more so Resident Evil 2 on Dreamcast. I don't know why the Dreamcast version. Maybe there's just not many copies.
Yeah, it has to be. I mean, it's like why the whole Saturn library is on fire, because it's just scarcity.
And then I also have like Fatal Frame 2 on PS2. Like those games are starting to get more pricey, even though they're available for download via PSN, like on your PS3. Like they're still going up in price. I've got all the Silent Hill, copies, and yeah, no, I've got a couple of games.
So it sounds like you certainly maintained your collection when you really started kind of getting into it as a teenager. Do you still have the original PlayStation 1 and Dreamcast?
I still have those OGs, yeah, PS1 and Dreamcast. I still use my Dreamcast for streaming every once in a while.
Yeah, no,
and that's still holding up.
Those things, I never owned a Dreamcast, but I came into possession of one recently, and I'm really sort of impressed with how hardy they are compared to some of their peers.
Yeah, no, they're bricks.
So, another question then. So we've talked a lot about very single-player focused genres, but I think coming of age with video gaming, especially in the mid-2000s, with, especially with 7th generation, which is, I think, you had some online functionality with 6th gen, but I think 7th gen is where it's really, really serious. Did you have any big multiplayer gaming phases, whether that's something like, Counter-Strike or League or something like that?
Funny enough, when PC games started to kind of like take off, a lot of my friends were super into World of Warcraft. They instantly hopped on it, and they convinced me to join them for a summer, and I played for quite a bit. But after about a year, I just stopped playing that, and I started to focus more on console. The big multiplayer games that I got into were Gears of War and, of course, Call of Duty. But Gears of War was always the one I took more to. Like Gears 2 and Gears 3, I would actually go on game battles with a group of people and like face off against other clans and stuff. It was an interesting time, and I think the only reason I stopped doing it wasn't because like it wasn't fun or like I wasn't good or anything, because I was actually quite good at Gears of War. It was that I would get on a clan, we would like lose a couple of games in a row, and everyone would just be super toxic to each other. So I found that the toxic side of multiplayer games, that when you take them super seriously with other people, was kind of what made me stop, and that's when I started taking single-player stuff more seriously and expanding my collection and whatnot. And I don't think I really got super hardcore into multiplayer again.
Even as a streamer, you haven't been like, oh, let me play Rocket League or something like that with more modern stuff?
Yeah, I suppose with more modern stuff, I've done it more casually. The only game that I really streamed a lot of was Friday the 13th. because that game was just, I got to admit, the launch of that game was so big and it was so exciting, but it was also one of the messiest launches I've ever seen. And the game, you couldn't even finish half the games you joined, but it was so much fun that I streamed an absolute monstrous amount of hours in like the first month. And
when would that have been? I don't think I'm familiar with that game.
I think it was... Here, let me go look up the release date. Okay, May 2017.
Okay.
And yeah, just a couple... It was like a straight month of just me pretty much only streaming that game, along with like a couple of other speedruns, but lots of Friday the 13th. But obviously I wasn't taking it super seriously because it was Friday the 13th, of course. Like, how can you take that seriously? But yeah, and then recently I've gotten more into like Hunt Showdown, which is a pretty cool game. Like, it's kind of a Western Gothic vibe set in like the bayou.
Yeah, that's like the real Cajun.
Hunt each other.
Yeah, you hunt monsters and whatnot, each other. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fun. Rainbow Six Siege I was introduced to last year. My girlfriend Biddy showed me it and was like, "Hey, you should try this." I was like, all right, and I got into that, but I don't play it very often. But yeah, multiplayer definitely has taken the back seat, but I do once in a while, play it just for fun.
Yeah. Well, in that case, let's talk about speedrunning. What's your first exposure to speedrunning?
2015. I was playing a couple of games because I had my wisdom teeth taken out, and I was just sitting in bed for days upon days with barely anything to do other than just play games and watch movies. And I got like a tooth infection too from that, so It was an extended like 3 weeks of practically dying in bed. So that was fun, but that's how I found speedrunning. I looked for some glitches and tricks and stuff in the games that I was playing, and I looked up RE4, Resident Evil 4 Ditman glitch. What's that? Let's watch the video. And I learned how to Ditman glitch. And what was the recommended video? Like 5 recommended videos when YouTube's recommended list made sense. RE4 New Game Plus speedruns. Okay, what's a speedrun? So I clicked on it, and there was a timer, and he was going super quick. I was like, what is this? People do this? And it said he beat the game in like an hour, 27 minutes. I was like, no way, that's not possible. And then I watched the whole thing, and I was mind blown. And then another recommended video to that video was a Games Done Quick video. And I was like, oh, what's Games Done Quick? And I clicked on the Games Done Quick channel, and I saw they had all these videos, just a bunch of different games, speedrunning for charity. And I was like, oh my god, this is bigger than I thought. Clicked on all the videos, watched a bunch of them. Yeah, no, just started going down the rabbit hole of the Games Done Quick YouTube. And then, like, finally, after maybe, like, the 5th or 6th video, I noticed that in their description, they were like, this is all streamed on twitch.tv/GamesDoneQuick. And I was like, oh, what's Twitch? And so I clicked on the Twitch link, and I found Twitch. And I was like, what the fuck? It was like, hey, here's speedrunning. Oh, here's Games Done Quick. Oh, here's Twitch. It's all literally all in one night. And it was insane. It was insane to find all of this stuff because I had been gaming for so long, and it's like, how did I miss this? So that's how I got into speedrunning. I just started kind of trying to do New Game Plus Resident Evil 4 chapter by chapter, just kind of learning it and seeing how fast I can go. And then I started streaming, got super into that, started playing Silent Hill 2 speedruns, and kind of just took off from there. I couldn't stop learning new games at that point.
Was there any game that you feel like was the particular breakout success for you in terms of establishing yourself as a streamer? Because I know you have a lot of games that you're good at, so I'm curious to see what your answer to this would be.
I feel like the Silent Hill series was something that wasn't super explored in terms of speedrunning back in 2015. for streamers at least. So when I was playing Silent Hill 2, when I was doing those speedruns, that's primarily how my audience grew. And Resident Evil 4 as well. But Resident Evil 4 was more so... There's a joke in the RE4 community, like speedrunning community, that there are RE4 cultists, and they only watch RE4. So I think I had a pretty good viewership with RE4, like, even when I started streaming, but it wasn't really, like, establishing my channel. It was just, hey, I'm here to watch, and then as soon as I do anything else, they're just gone. So I think Silent Hill is really what helped me establish myself and my channel. Silent Hill 2 and Silent Hill 3 specifically. Those are the two speedruns that I think did quite well on my channel, and yeah. Some of the other games that I learned afterwards were definitely games that I really enjoyed, but I don't think it really held a bigger audience, but definitely brought new people to my channel, so I would say Silent Hill, for the most part, is definitely what helped the most, but some other games like Devil May Cry and some of the other Resident Evil games, Jet Set Radio was like the first run I did at GDQ, so it's, yeah, it was just a big amalgamation of everything.
Now, I feel like I have to ask this because, you know, you've been doing so many horror speedruns. I feel like there was a period of time where every horror speedrunner was only playing Resident Evil 2 Remake. Were you on that train?
I was on that train.
How do you feel about Resident Evil 2 Remake now? Is this a loaded question?
It is, but it's a good one. It's not a bad question. It's a really good one, actually, because when the game came out, I think everyone was just so shocked because Resident Evil 1 Remake came out 2002, so fast forward 17 years and we have another remake, and after all of that time you can see how much, you know, the Resident Evil series has grown, and how it kind of... It tries to keep those old, you know, those old ways, you know, the menu system, the way that you fight zombies, and the puzzles and whatnot. It tries to keep its old ways, but it also tries to bring in the modern mechanics. You know, the movement's changed to be more realistic, and the aiming is changed to be more of a third-person shooter, and the puzzles are not so insane. They're a little bit dumbed down so that a broader audience can kind of get through the game a little bit easier, and it's definitely a really good remake, but it's also one of those things where it's not a one-to-one remake with the original because it's been so long. RE1 Remake was only 6 years apart, whereas RE2 Remake is 20, so I feel like it was a bit of a reimagining, more so than a remake, but it was a really good one, because it still covered the whole, you know, Resident Evil 2 spiel of the story and the important events, but it just kind of put a new modern twist to it. And I think Resident Evil 2 Remake, when it came out, it was huge for everybody. Just like Resident Evil 7 was. It was huge for everybody in the horror community who likes to stream those games, and it was exciting. It was really exciting, but also Resident Evil 2 Remake came with a price, for me at least. And this is actually partly why I stopped running the game, like seriously, at certain points, was because I was a part of the moderator crew on Speedrun.com. And, well... yeah, it started out the 2 weeks prior to the game coming out. A lot of things were being set in motion. We were discussing the possibilities of what we would need to make the rules and stuff, and yada yada, and those people were on board. Come the release, everyone plays it, and they're like, wow, this game's fucking awesome. So many people are going to be running this. And my thought was, yeah, so many people are going to be running this. But... is it going to be overwhelming, or are we going to be able to handle this? And everyone was like, no, we got this, we got this. And I was like, okay, all right. And when we actually opened up the leaderboards, about 3 or 4 days after that happened, 3 of the other moderators were just like, I'm out.
Oh,
and
no.
I was like, oh, no, why? And they were like, I just don't feel like it now. I'm pretty sure there was more reason to it, but they were just being, I guess, cordial. And they were like, nah, I don't feel like doing this. It's a bit stressful, and I don't have that much time. And I was just sitting there like, no, don't do this. No, no. And so I was sitting there. I think I only had 2 other moderators who, one of them was pretty like inactive. And, I'm a full-time streamer, so I can't like sit there and just verify runs every day for like hours on end. So I'm sitting there wondering like what is going to happen now. And I remember the day after that 3rd moderator left, there was huge controversy in the forums. People were complaining about verification times, and I was just sitting there like, dude, it's been 1 day and this is already going really bad. And so I had to call in like, a superhero squad of new verifiers to save the day. So I got a couple of trusted Resident Evil 7 moderators and a couple of other people from the Resident Evil community who help with like timers and like auto splitters and SRT and stuff. So I got all them, got them all in a Discord group, and I was like, all right, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna make a forum post. We're gonna revise all of the rules, and we're gonna try and verify a couple of runs like every other day. If you can, just do what you can. Just don't worry about verification. Just worry about the controversy. So then after that, it was the big leaderboard move, where a forum post had gotten to a point where everyone took a vote, and they were like, we want this to look like this. Which meant we had to change a variable. And, if you moderate a speedrun leaderboard, right?
Holy crap, dude. It is. I only speedrun, like I only moderate ghost towns, so like my life is pretty easy because I get to do things. But even trying to do things with no one objecting and no one stopping you, it is a pain, and I can't even imagine having to do it with that much scrutiny.
Oh yeah, no, there was like 200 people just going crazy, and I had 300 runs awaiting verification for Resident Evil 2 Remake. 300, and I was worried, and there was big controversy, and then we had to change a variable based on a vote. So because we had to change the variable, all of the runs that were verified had to be changed to another category, and they all had to be edited. So we had to edit
manually. Yep,
hundreds of runs, and it was such a pain. And by the time it was all over, it was a huge sigh of relief because things kind of died down a little bit. But that was a huge hit for my RE2 Remake experience. As much as I love the game, I can't forget that absolute shit show I went through with moderating. And let me tell you, RE3 Remake was so much easier. Oh, it was so much easier.
Yeah, I mean, I think the one less I've noticed this too. I mean, I'm not going to name any names because I don't want to make it sound like I'm calling people out, but like I've definitely seen with some high profile new releases that, people get stressed out by, moderation. And anyone listening, moderation of speedrun.com boards is such a labor of love because you both have to work with the community as well as work with the site itself, which is nice and free, but like, sometimes kind of difficult to handle. And just be patient with anyone who's moderating under that, because certainly they're doing it again as a labor of love. And I'm sorry to hear that it affected, but like also, hopefully anybody who hears this will think of like, oh yeah, the next time, the next big release comes out, know that there's going to be a lot of churning. You just have to give it time to play out.
Yep, Resident Evil Village.
Oh, does that have a release date?
It doesn't. A lot of people theorize that it comes out early 2021. I hope it's late 2021, just for a couple of extra months of, polish.
Yeah, for cooking, yeah. Although, I feel like that's been the thing with, because, like, what? RE2 Remake was, like, February, right? And then RE3 Remake was, like, a similar kind of time of year?
Yeah, it was April, so they were only about a year and 2 months apart. And RE3 Remake definitely was not as polished as RE2 Remake, but for probably business reasons and like release date reasons, because next gen comes out, and yeah, I think RE3 Remake was kind of on the back burner while Village was the game that really was getting the love.
Yeah,
because it was next
18,
gen and it was like the next big release, so
that makes sense.
Which is unfortunate, but It happens.
Yeah, for sure. Let's get some takes. I like to ask some questions and just get takes about speedruns. Of all the games that you've speedrun, what run is your favorite?
Fear instantly comes to mind.
God, it's such
because
a good speedrun.
Fear is just a good speedrun. It's got all of the quirky first-person shooter tricks that you want to see. You don't just run past all the enemies. Like, you gotta actually, get your hands dirty.
Literally.
Take out some enemies and, literally you punch them. And, it's got pretty basic mechanics. Like, there's a jump. There's no sprint button. There's no, extra quirky things. It's just, use medkit, throw grenade, shoot gun. It's simple FPS stuff, and it all comes together very nicely, especially when you have, those kind of tricks where you go out of bounds and do, like, prop boosting and quick ports and all that jazz. It's just a good run. It's a solid run. And it's definitely the polar opposite to, like, another one of my favorites, which is Devil May Cry, where it's just 100%. Are you executing correctly? Good. Now, did you get good luck? Good. Nothing else to it. No out of bounds, no glitches, no exploits, just pure get good.
Yeah, I mean, we'll be discussing both of those runs, later. But I do really I agree with that kind of assessment in terms of the experience of watching them and what I have to infer about the experience of running them. What about the flip side here? What's your least favorite speedrun?
That's also a good question. I feel like my least favorite speedruns that I've done are probably... Oh man, that's actually really difficult. 'Cause there's a battle of the worst. There's definitely a battle of the worst, because I got to admit, when Blair Witch came out, that run was actually going to be really cool, because there was like 2 really big out-of-bounds sequences, and that would have just made the speedrun so much faster and more, I guess, enjoyable. But the very first or second patch that came out, like a week after release, like completely destroyed any hope of getting out of bounds in those spots anymore. And I kept on doing the run because I just wanted to see how it would progress, if anything else would be found, and nope. And yeah, that speedrun just kinda sucks now. Hence why nobody's done a run in... Let me check.
Yeah, I definitely remember that being a game that some people talked about around the time of release, and then due to patches just sort of fell off everyone's radar.
Okay, somebody did a run 3 months ago, but prior to that, 11 months. So almost a whole year with not a single run submitted, which is, kind of par for the course for certain games, but this one, this board would have been way more full if those patches didn't happen.
Yeah, no, that's always a bummer to see that too, especially when I mean, do you feel like did that feel targeted? I mean, I don't. Sometimes it's a situation where things are so specific, and then sometimes maybe this was a situation where things were so loose it was affecting casual players. I don't know.
I don't think it was targeted, but I think what happened was there were a couple of there were a couple of streamers who had like a lot of viewers playing Blair Witch, and they actually figured out how to get out of bounds accidentally and didn't know where they were going, and they were like lost. And I think that's what made them patch it. And so I don't think it was targeted, but at the same time, like there's like no way to down patch. Like no one's figured out how to down patch. Like,
because I guess there's no like retail release or anything, right?
Yeah, it's just. Yeah, we can't figure it out, and nobody has like the unpatched version. I don't know why nobody kept it. It's probably our fault, but anyways.
I mean, it's hard to know, right? Like, I mean, I think what you said earlier, which was, it's going to be easier to get people to try it if you can do it on current patch, and maybe you'll find more things. And then, of course, as it turns out, you said there was a battle though. So that means there's
There
another
was
game.
there is another game that I kind of don't like as a speedrun anymore. I used to really like it, and now I kind of don't like it anymore. And that's The Suffering. And the reason why is because in The Suffering, when I got world record 2 years ago, the run had a pretty good mixture of getting through levels normally and just playing well and having good movement and aim, and then also doing some really big, really big skips. A couple of which were pretty enormous, and the run was about 23 minutes long. And then fast forward about 3 or 4 months, I think, and there was a runner who found some enormous skips, and it cut the run down by about 8 minutes. So it was a 15-minute speedrun. And then somebody else found some big skips, and now it's a 13-minute speedrun. But unfortunately, you're no longer really, like, playing the game. And I know that's kind of like one of those arbitrary things with speedrunning. It's like, what is any percent? Any percent is beating the game as fast as possible. So that's just how it is. But the run slowly became something that I just did not like, because it was just a really hard trick after a really hard trick after a couple of small tricks, and you kept on skipping so much to the point where I just kind of didn't like it anymore. And my PC also, like, can't run the game very well because it's such a bad port for updated, like, you know, processors and equipment and stuff. So it's like I didn't want to force myself to just run a 12-minute speedrun that was just not my kind of thing anymore, and to also have a possibility of crashing like 10 minutes in. It was just, yeah, it just became a run. I was like, nope,
a lot of factors at play that just sort of said, you know what, maybe this isn't for me anymore.
Yeah, and you know, there are some games that I run where there are a lot of skips, and it's crazy. But like, Fear is a good example of a game that it's balanced. It's got gameplay, it's got skips. It's some of them hard, some of them, you know, not so hard. But you're still, like, for the most part, going through pretty big sections of the game as you would optimizing them. But the Suffering, you just kind of skip everything.
All right, one more specific game question then. A game that you would like to speedrun, but you haven't gotten around to it, whether for time reasons or it just being sort of incompatible with what you do streaming.
Honestly, I did want to get into, like, The Last of Us. Because Anthony's a friend of mine who I definitely see as a very skilled runner of a game that honestly is a really popular game. And I thought to myself, like, okay, well, this is kind of horror adjacent, The Last of Us. I could get into that, but as soon as I wanted to run that game, I believe RE2 Remake was kind of popping off, and I decided I would focus on that. And I just never ended up learning it, just out of time, I guess. But
no,
you know,
I mean,
fast forward,
it seems like it would be time consuming to learn for sure.
Yeah, 3-hour run. It definitely time consuming. Not that I don't do long runs. I've done a couple of pretty long runs, but yeah, I just haven't gotten around to it. And then I suppose, like, another game that just kind of doesn't really fit the stream kind of vibe that I do. I've always wanted to actually learn, like, a legit Nintendo title. You know, not a game that was featured on the GameCube, but just a legit Nintendo character title. Whether it be Mario or Kirby or, you know, Yoshi or whatever. Just something in the Nintendo universe. And I have not done that yet.
Interesting. I mean, it's such a, yeah, obviously it's a wide, do you feel like there's a particular, like, era or a game that you have in mind, or you just, it's like a general sentiment, you're like, I just want to have just a little bit as a treat?
Yeah, no, it's kind of just a sentiment. I've looked at SM64 and I think, okay, high skill ceiling, looks fun, looks a bit clunky, but that's just the camera. That's just
Right,
the camera,
yeah,
I
that's
think.
just- yeah.
I think everything else is, like, not that bad. So, you know, that seems like a good one. Super Mario Sunshine, I was interested in at one point, but then I realized, I don't like the GameCube controller that much. I don't want to be doing C-stick stuff, and you have to do C-stick stuff in Super Mario Sunshine, so I was like, no, never mind. And then, you know, Kirby games I looked at, and I was like, okay, Nightmare in Dreamland is pretty sick, but I gotta emulate this. And I don't know how to feel about Kirby, I guess. Haven't played the games in so long. Maybe I gotta return to them. And then there's, like, Metroid Prime. That's a sick run. But I also I don't know if I want to invest in it. There's a lot of Nintendo games I could pick from. It's just kind of one of those things where, like, I have a list of runs that I want to do. You know, like, I want to have a movie game. I want to have, like, a beat-em-up game. I want to have a hack-and-slash game. I want to have an FPS game. I want to have different types of games on my repertoire. You know, I want an RPG. I want, you know, a platformer. And so on and so forth. I just kind of want to fit a game into all of these different categories just to say that I tried it out. I did it.
You know, that kind of leads, I think, to my final question for just general speedrunning stuff, which is I always like to ask, do you feel like you have a particular role in speedrunning or mission statement in speedrunning? And it sounds to me like maybe the answer to that is variety speedrunner, like truly accomplish, you know, a full variety. Do you think that that's the answer for you, or would you say something else?
I would say, yeah, no, that's kind of hitting it pretty close. I would say that my channel has gone through, you know, just my career in speedrunning and streaming has gone through so many different phases, from, you know, Silent Hill speedrunning to grinding out Jet Set Radio to, you know, learning .hack GU Last Recode when it came out to learning Beautiful Joe and then learning Fear and doing a Shenmue run and just so many different things. And, you know, it's definitely a variety of runs that you can't really see anywhere else. I would say, like, in the grand scheme of things, you know, I'm not, like, this big name in speedrunning, but I'm also, like, one of the only people you'll ever be able to see doing a certain game back-to-back. Like, you'll probably never see anyone else do, like, a Fatal Frame run back-to-back with, like, a Fear run, or, like, a Deadly Premonition run, or the Convenience Store, or Devil May Cry, or Visage. You know, it's just a huge variety of runs, and I'd like to say that, like, it's proof that if you're a speedrunner, if you put all your cookies into one basket, it might work out for you. But it truly, the variety is something you should always try out, and if it's not for you, it's not for you. But I suggest everybody that speedruns, if you have, like, a couple of games on your list, awesome. Keep adding. Just keep adding. Keep trying new stuff out. It'll actually make you a better speedrunner. I found that early on when I was doing mainly Silent Hill speedruns, Silent Hill speedruns are all the same. You just run to point A to point B with a certain movement set and pick up items and solve puzzles and beat bosses, and that's it. And if I were to just grind out Silent Hill speedruns all the time for God knows how long, there would be a very small skill ceiling for speedrunning for me, because I'm not used to doing anything else other than tank controls or 3D controls, point A to point B puzzles. So, like, when I learned Jet Set Radio, which is, you know, platforming on roller skates with really, like, clunky Sega Dreamcast controls and having to button mash very consistently for quick sprays, that is just a new way of doing a game that I wouldn't have been introduced to, and it made me better at certain things, you know? And then, you know, moving on to stuff like Devil May Cry, which is extremely execution heavy, and if you press a button in a wrong way, you just completely mess up an entire room full of enemies. So the more games you learn, especially if they're, like, vastly different from each other, I feel like the better you get at speedrunning as a whole.
I would agree with that, 100%.
I definitely want to drive that message and just kind of encourage people to just learn a bunch of different games. And my GDQ runs, I think, prove that, because I've ran pretty much all the games I've ran in GDQ are completely different from each other.
Yeah, I think it almost builds on what we said at the very beginning of this about indie game speedrunning. You don't know until you run the game what the viability of the game is as a speedrun, period. But that's also personal, too. It's also the viability of the game as a speedrun for you, the speedrunner, and you really don't know until you try.
Yep, true.
All right, well, let's get into some games. Let's talk about some specifics here. First one up is Devil May Cry, and specifically for this interview, I watched over your runs, both your GDQ and world record run for Devil May Cry any percent normal, which was interesting because, as you said, it really is focused on execution. I did want to ask, I'm pretty sure you were playing this on PC. Was this a game that you had played when it first came out on PS2 and kind of something you visited throughout the years, or something that you came to later as a speedrun?
Currently, my sister's fiance, like back when I was maybe 15, 16, got me Devil May Cry on the PS2 for my birthday. So shoutouts to him for getting me that, otherwise I wouldn't have gotten into Devil May Cry. So he got me it, and I played it, and it was sick. It was a sick experience. It was like no other game I'd played, and that's what got me into Devil May Cry. You know, years later, Devil May Cry 3, Devil May Cry 4. We don't talk about the reboot. Devil May Cry 5 comes out 2019. One of the sickest action games I've ever played, and the kind of my love for Devil May Cry just is just kind of there. It's always been there, even if I haven't played the games like religiously every year.
I really like that you took the time to said we don't talk about the reboot, but completely skipped over DMC2, which matches up with every other Devil May Cry fan that I've ever talked to. But yeah, I appreciate that delivery. So one thing, with this run, you mentioned, execution, of course, is important. With this run, what is that execution about? Is it sort of being able to, consistently cancel things and deal with enemy patterns? Like, what kind of what is the execution that you need to keep tight in order to succeed?
So every single room has a very specific thing you need to execute, usually, if you want to get like a top time at least. So because the game has fixed cameras in a lot of spots, but it doesn't have tank controls, that joystick, you need to be very precise on which direction you put that joystick every single time the camera changes. So that execution in itself is something that you really got to get used to with Devil May Cry. And because the joystick and the camera and the movement works like that, you have to be really precise with your platforming as well. Platforming in Devil May Cry 1 is the clunkiest of the series, seeing as it's the first of its, kind. And there's certain mechanics with jumping that kind of make it weird. If you just tap the X button, he will do like a mini hop. So it's pressure sensitive.
Oh, pressure sensitive. Okay. I was literally having a discussion today, trying to explain why the PS2 had pressure-sensitive buttons and why it was important, and weirded me out when I played MGS2 on 360, which doesn't have those pressure-sensitive buttons. Really cool to hear about this, actually. Yeah,
it makes it so difficult to make it so that you get like every single second out of a mission, because if, like, take for instance mission 3, you go outside out to like the bridge area, and if you do a full jump to get up onto like the top of the door piece, whatever you call it, I don't know what to call it. There's like a red orb cache there that you need to get so you can get a perfect mission, get all the orbs that you need and stuff. So to get that special bonus, you need to hop up to that area, and if you do a full jump and you hold down X, you lose like 0.2 or 0.3 or something, as opposed to doing a short hop. And you have to do it pretty precisely as well. Like, if your angle is off, you don't get up there and you fall all the way to the bottom. So pressure sensitive jumps are definitely a thing, and it comes into play in a couple of other rooms later in the game as well, but it's all pretty precise. And then as well as Stinger. Stinger is an ability that you get at mission 3, and Stinger, you have to make sure that you're pointing your joystick yet again in the right direction before you press stinger. And you also need to make sure that Dante does this weird thing where if you hold down the joystick and the camera changes and you keep holding the joystick in that specific spot, don't even move it, a hair, he'll keep running in that direction. But he won't stinger in that direction. So you pretty much have to change your joystick at like super specific times to the exact angle that you want for stinger. And then there's enemy patterns where you're trying to slash cancel. Slash canceling is super big in certain rooms, and it'll definitely define whether or not you can get past mission 1 correctly. Because if you can't get past mission 1 correctly, you have to reset. Because if you don't get an S rank, it's dead run.
Right, and that's because you're the part of what's also going on in the run, besides the execution of fighting monsters, is that you're collecting these these ranks and orbs in order to get the equipment you need. And like, is there a little bit of RNG that goes into that in terms of making sure you have the resources to actually have, say, holy waters to kill bosses?
Yes, there is a little bit of RNG involved. The most heavy RNG sections are the first 5 missions, I would say. Mission 1, you go down to the basement, you fight all the marionettes, and the marionettes are the ones that come out of the walls are random. So there's 3 different kinds. There's the blue ones. There's 4 different kinds. The blue ones, the green ones, the purple ones, and the red ones, which are called the Bloody Marys. And the Bloody Marys and the purples have more health, substantially more compared to the green and the blue. So if you get all blues, I mean, you're good to go. Like, you're going to get a good time, probably. But that basement is the first section, because not only is the color and their health random, but their weapons are. So if you get one of the marionettes, if you get like a purple marionette who's holding a shotgun, most likely he's gonna roll up on you and just shoot you, and the shotgun does enough damage to where you're not gonna get an S rank.
That's I was just wondering that. I was like, oh man, were there some of the enemies that would have had guns too? And of course the answer is yes. One thing I did want to share from watching the world record VOD had maybe one of the you have I think chat available on your stream VODs, and I think it was one person said it hurts my eyes watching you play this because you're so bad, which is just like an excellent thing to leave for future generations.
Yeah.
I really could not get over that being in the video. Like once you said that, it's pretty much confirmed and blessed. So going forward with this now, I mean, you have the top time. Do you have any plans to improve this, or maybe to focus on other categories in this game?
I could go back and improve any percent, but all of my time save is right at the end of the game. So I would need to play really, really well and get really good luck. And if I don't do certain tricks at the end of the game, I don't get that time save. So I guess it's not that I don't want to improve it, it's that, man, do I want to grind again? I don't know. It's a rough game to grind.
Yeah, no, I could definitely see that.
There are other categories that I've wanted to do, but I guess I'm just not like super motivated to do them. I feel comfortable with my any percent normal time. Any percent easy it's basically almost the same route, just you don't have to, your orbs aren't as important in that category, so it's a little bit more relaxed. But then there's Dante Must Die. Dante Must Die is messed up. It's like, it's the masochistic run. I'm not that masochistic. And then there's 100%, which, is it 100%? I think it's all, I forgot the specifics behind the category, but like it's picking up all like the blue orbs and buying all of the things, the abilities and stuff. And that is a cool category, but at the same time, it's totally dependent on orb count. It would probably feel pretty bad getting towards like the end of a run and being like, oh, I'm down 200 orbs and now I lose minutes of time because I don't have 200 orbs. And I don't want to do that. That just seems meh.
Yeah, no, that's fair. There's always, I feel like when you get to runs that are more completionist, you're more likely to run into that sort of that sort of poison pill that just really affects the rest. Let's move on to Fear then, which is again, I think we've already talked about like Monolith, especially this era of Monolith is just so wonderful. I mean, Fear was a game that I had played a lot as a kid. I had the privilege of going my first GDQ appearance. My only GDQ appearance was Shogo, the first Lift Tech game. So really excited to talk about this one with you. How did you get into Fear? Was it something that you had played around launch?
I played it on console, which the game was like ported to console. It was first a PC game, and I guess the console ports were kind of meh comparison to like the PC versions, but the PC version was kind of ahead of its time. Pretty sure it strained the absolute shit out of all the PCs out there, kind of like Crysis did. But yeah, I played it, and I played it a few years after it released on console. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it a ton. I actually played Fear and Condemned, like, back to back. And both awesome games. And Fear was kind of a game that was just sitting in my Steam library. And one time, I did a subathon. And I made a goal. I was like, alright, if we get to this amount of subs, I'll do a random speedrun of Fear. And everyone was like, oh, dude, that game's awesome. I want to see that. And so I did it. I had no idea what I was doing, but I did it. And afterwards, I looked up some of the tricks that I could implement. And I was like, oh, this is actually a really sick run. I'm gonna learn this. And so I learned it. And this was before quick porting. So I had to learn a bunch of tricks that aren't necessary anymore in the run. But I learned them all. They were super awesome. And my chat was super into it. And so I just kind of started running it. It was really just it was one of those things where I was like, all right, I'll make this a goal. I'll play it. I'll try to go fast. And if it's fun, maybe I'll look into it more. And that's what happened. It was kind of a smooth transition.
All right, this game has so many incredibly cool tricks. We could probably spend like another hour talking about them, but we don't have another hour. So I'm going to ask you, do you have a favorite, or at least a few favorites that you'd want to just talk about?
I think the floppy boost is so cool. You would never think that Point Man could land on a floppy drive in midair and jump off of it. Like, that's not something you would think of. And it's pretty obvious. Like, if you go watch my GDQ run of Fear, I was so defeated when, the floppy drive didn't spawn in. And Blood Thunder was like, yo, I think you just need to redo this setting. And so we exited the game, redid the setting, and it spawned. And I was so relieved and so happy that I could do the floppy boost. And I think not only is it my favorite trick, but that moment at that GDQ run also solidified how awesome that trick is, because everyone in the chat was like freaking out at it.
Yeah, it's great too, because even before that point in the run, there are other prop boosts. I think there's like the box boost,
the box boost,
and the ceiling tile.
The ceiling tile, which has a few names. There's the Norton skip, the Chester skip, which is like the OG name for it, because he likes to eat cheesy poos, Norton Mapes, and Chester the cheetah. Yeah, anyways. And then there's the Fat Bastard skip, because he literally looks like Fat Bastard from Austin Powers.
He really does.
So yeah, that skip is also pretty cool. That one, I would say that one is also one of my favorites, but it's really, like, finicky, that ceiling tile. So I find it to not be as fun, because it's finicky.
Yeah, it was really interesting coming back to this. I try not to interject myself too much in the interviews, but I think I had watched some of my friend KZ Frew play this, and since then I had played. There was a period of time where Monolith would license out their Lift Tech engine, to other companies, and there is a very, very shovelware World War II game called, I think it's called it's like Mortar 4 Operation Thunderstorm or something like that. It's Operation Thunderstorm on Steam, but it has basically all of the same glitches. So
Oh?
I learned it, and Rithen, I don't know if you know Rithen, she's a Polish speedrunner. She's one of the moderators for it, and it has the quick ports, the quick save twice and load, and then also has the float glitch where you interact with the ladder, and then you hover and you maintain your height, and you have to use things to change up your height, or you can crouch. And it was just really funny to then watch back. I'm like, oh, these are all the same tricks, because again, it's the same engine. So I don't know if you ever really need shovelware World War II. You already know the tricks. You could probably, it's like a 15-minute FPS speedrun. But it was really really funny just to see all of the same stuff. The one thing I did want to ask for some clarification. Like, obviously, I just shared that I have some experience with these tricks in another game, but have people gotten a better understanding of the laptop skip?
I honestly, I would like to sum it up as laptop moves, and because you're in the laptop's hitbox, it just sends you flying. Like, that's the only explanation behind it. That's gotta be the only explanation.
Yeah, that's what it looks like, especially from watching both the GDQ and your 4850 run. That seems like the answer, but the movement is so sudden. It's like it's not a prop boost, folks. Like, if you watch it, when it works, you're upstairs. You're there now.
It's a teleport. Yeah, it's insane. I don't think we have any idea why it works or how it works, but it just works and we use it. And there's also another strat you can do without the laptop teleport. If you're not feeling the laptop teleport, you can always shoot the portrait, jump on top of the portrait, and get upstairs.
Oh yeah, I think that jogs a memory. I think of watching someone do that long ago in a previous version. With this game, so. The run, of course, that we're talking about is any percent, and especially the current patch version. Have you ever thought about? Because I know I've been told I haven't watched it myself, but I'm told that Unpatched it has more tricks that were patched out, but also that people haven't taken things like quick porting back to an unpatched run. I'm just curious if you had more plans for either this any percent or ever approaching another fear category.
Honestly, the unpatched is a pretty sick run. It's different from patched because from what I can tell, quick porting isn't doable on unpatched, and they haven't figured it out yet. There might be a way of doing it, but it hasn't been found, and you can't do it the same way you do it on patched, which is really weird, but that's a thing, yeah. But the unpatched version does have a couple of really cool ladder clips where you kind of confuse the game into thinking you're on the ladder, but you're not, and so you kind of clip through certain walls next to the ladders, and then you kind of float out of bounds, and this whole weird way of skipping certain levels. It's cool. I don't know if I'll ever get into it unless quick porting is found in it. Simply because it would actually be faster if we could quick port. It would be a faster category if we could quick port, probably minutes faster, because there's a couple of levels where you can't quick port, but you can do the ladder glitch to get out of bounds, so you'd be able to float to the exit. So that is definitely something I'd be interested in if it ever happens.
Right.
In terms of other categories, glitchless, I don't know. Glitchless isn't a bad category for fear because it's still fear, and it's got, this shotgun that's extremely satisfying to use, and the level design isn't too confusing, and it's generally quite a fun game, but it is also like half an hour longer, and I don't really know if I want to do a half an hour extra of fear without doing any tricks. It's kind of just, any percent is just kind of how I did the game and how it's been, and probably how it will always be. But maybe one day I'll try a glitchless just for fun, just to see how it is, just to finally just say I tried it.
Right.
And then there's another category that used to exist called any percent no out of bounds, but it was extremely, the rules were so arbitrary and nobody ran it, and I just kind of talked to the community. I was like, hey, I'm just gonna take this category down, and we're gonna rework a different category. And I think what we're gonna try and do is see if anyone wants to join me in doing an old school kind of any percent run, where we do no quick porting. So it would be like the patched version, but before quick porting was implemented. So back when I started learning the game, it would be like that. So there's more prop boosts and more kind of weird float glitch stuff. And I think that would probably be a better category than doing no out of bounds, because it's less arbitrary in terms of like the rule set, and it also just provides you with more interesting tricks to do.
No, that seems fair. I mean, and again, I think maybe what you're driving it to is sort of, you know, when it comes to putting together a category like this, you know, you do want a good mix of things, you know, and I think the Fear Any Percent is giving you that. And also, the reason of doing no quick porting again would be to do those, you know, tricks that you enjoyed. And in much the same way that sometimes, you know, like when you were talking earlier about the suffering, sometimes you can cut out too much. And no, I feel like that's sort of one of those things when you're testing out whether you like a category. You know, does it have the right mix of things? But let's get on to the third game here. Let's go for a photo finish.
Ooh.
Yeah. So I watched the GDQ VOD, and you got a lot of picture puns there, which is not uncommon for a GDQ run experience. With Fatal Frame, you mentioned, I think earlier, that, you know, you had collected horror games, got into, you know, PS2 stuff like that. And I think you mentioned this one. Fatal Frame was one of those ones that you had collected.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It was one of the first games to make me actually turn off my console.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Is there a specific spooky story there?
You know, honestly, it was.
Or was this frustration?
Really it was spooks.
It was spooks.
Okay. It was spooks. I'm trying to remember exactly which ghost it was. No, I think it was just straight up the first ghost in the game. The first ghost in the game was so. Or no. It was the first ghost after Mafuyu's section where you play as Miku. That ghost scared the crap out of me because I was already so scared by the first ghost that Mafuyu had to fight, and you have to fight ghosts in Fatal. This is the reason why Fatal Frame like spooked me so much, because I was used to Silent Hill and Resident Evil, where you had the choice. You know, you can run away from an enemy, and you can fight it, you know, whenever you want. For the most part, you know, you have the decision. But in Fatal Frame, to progress the game, you have to fight the ghosts. It's a requirement. And so I just wasn't used to that, and fighting those first two ghosts, I was like, nope, I'm done. I need to turn this off. I need to come back to this another time. Yeah, it was the first game to make me turn off my console.
But now you're a speedrunner of Fatal Frame, and you actually at AGDQ 2020, I believe that's the first Fatal Frame appearance at a GDQ event, right?
Yeah, the run was showcased on an online event, and I believe Sasam did that, and that run definitely was able to garner some more interest in Fatal Frame returning. So I think that definitely helped my chances. But it was the first time Fatal Frame had been done on the stage, and surprisingly, because Fatal Frame has been submitted quite a few times, and not only Fatal Frame 1, but Fatal Frame 2, and I think maybe the combination of the run that Sasam did, and kind of the more interesting Fatal Frame 1 run being, you know, Fatal Frame 2 is interesting, but it's not as interesting as 1 because of the quick shot mechanics and stuff like that. So yeah, I think my odds were just, you know, upped a little bit, and I'm a reliable person for GDQ. I never do anything wrong. I'm always on the couches. I'm always chilling out there, so they trust me.
Bread and butter.
Yeah, so they definitely trusted me with it, and I'd like to think it went really well, especially because Fatal Frame's a bit risky.
No, you know, that was one of the things that was interesting to me watching, was because I imagine maybe not all of the risk was called out, but certainly going into the final boss and being like, well, you know, she can one shot kill me, and there's nothing I can do about it. I was like, well, yeah. All right, let's go.
Yeah, there's no checkpoints, and I didn't save a single time in that run. So
Yeah, no, that was something. So I would say of the runs, these 3 runs, I feel like Fatal Frame was probably the one that was maybe the hardest for a casual viewer to say, like, yes, this is the thing that makes this is the sort of execution that you have to bring to the speed run. What would you highlight to someone as being like the thing to work on? Is it the quick shotting? Is it movement?
I 100% think it's quick shotting. I think, let me go to the leaderboard really quick. I think before quick shotting was actually implemented heavily into the run, this was before Alien and I, a fellow runner, started having like this really intense, awesome rivalry. I believe it was... Let's see here. Yeah, actually, the game was a 1:16, and now it is a 1:11. So 5 minutes of time saved just from actually implementing quick shots into the run, which is huge. That's a lot of time for a survival horror game where you're primarily going from point A to point B and doing puzzles and whatnot. So I would say quick shotting is the biggest thing people need to work on if they want to run the game, but also the biggest thing that you should pay attention to, because quick shotting is very specific. If you don't do it correctly, ghosts in Fatal Frame are very random. They can do whatever they want. They can float around a little bit. They can literally teleport behind you, mess up your movement and your placement in the room. And yeah, I'd say quick shotting is the most important thing, and everything else is really secondary.
Do you feel like the current... So you mentioned you had a rivalry with this other runner, Alien, and I can see right now that, your PB VOD is titled Former World Record, and I can see that Alien currently has this top time. Do you feel like that rivalry contributed to driving down the time? And also, do you have any plans to return and rekindle that rivalry?
Oh, absolutely. I believe when Alien got the 1:14, I think that's when I started running. And then I beat his time, and then he got a better 1:14. And then I got a 1:13, and then he got a 1:13, and then I got a 1:12, and then he got a 1:12, and it just kept on going back and forth. We'd beat each other by like 10, 20 seconds, and then I got the 1:11, and I was like, okay, this is a 1:11. Like, this is insane. This is getting hard. And he came back and beat me by a whopping like 29 seconds. No, 30 seconds. 31, jeez. And yeah, that's when I was like, oh man, if I want to get this record back, it's going to be a grind. Because with Fatal Frame, you never know. You never know how long it's going to take to PB. It could take you 5 days. It could take you 5 weeks. There's just no way of knowing what the RNG has in store for you. Like, if you get bad luck on... I think there's like 5 ghosts in the game where if you get bad luck, it's just a reset right off the bat. Like, there's no way you can even save your run. So that's really how it's gotten.
That's tough.
Fatal Frame went from a run that was relatively easy to get world record in to now it's very, very difficult.
But that's cool. I think that speaks to it. Sometimes I think, so we're talking now about rivalries. We had talked previously about sort of the, times when the game is new and there's an explosion of interest. But also just like a dedicated 1v1 rivalry also does so much, I think, to really, to drive down a particular game's time. And it's always, if you're out there and like you got the top time in a game and someone else comes along and takes it, like if you even think that you want to come back a little bit, so often it'll be fun for you, it'll be fun for that other person, and it'll do a lot to really fashion the run into an optimized speed game, and it's just a great opportunity when it comes up.
I agree. It's and also, it gets more people interested in maybe learning themselves too. Kind of a community driving thing, right, as well as driving the world record down.
Yeah, no, I mean, like if these two folks are going at it, like maybe I should get involved too.
Exactly.
All right, let's start to wind down a little bit. get some exit questions here. One of the things I like to do in this interview series is have a little connective tissue to have a question from my previous guest for my next guest. Argic, Sonic Runner, had this question for you. What is your opinion or your hot take on the next generation of hardware? And he meant that broadly too, meaning PS5, Xbox Series X, Nvidia, the 30 series cards. Do you think they're going to change kind of gaming, or is it just going to sort of proceed apace?
I do think that the PS5 backwards compatibility with PS4 is going to be a big thing, because the PS5 supposedly has an SSD that is faster than anything you could put in your PS4. That's what they say. I don't know if that's the truth. I would like to believe it's the truth and that Sony ain't just lying. But I think that's going to be pretty big because, most PS4 titles don't have the luxury of having a load remover. Some do. Horizon Zero Dawn is a good example of a game that has load remover. I believe Bloodborne does too. And I do think that most games will probably be faster on PS5, most PS4 titles, if they're timed RTA, so I think that's going to probably play a big factor. I could see most leaderboards, if they have a lot of runners, just instantly splitting things up. I could see a lot of community votes happening, probably a little bit of controversy here and there, but when it comes to the Xbox, I don't really understand the backwards compatibility as much. I know that the Xbox One backwards compatibility was already doing wonders for certain speed games. An example, I believe Silent Hill Homecoming, the Silent Hill community was super into the Xbox One because the loading times were much faster, and that game is RTA. So it would probably be the same with the next Xbox if backwards compatibility is going to be a focus again, like the Xbox One. And in terms of the Nvidia cards, oh man, like, it's gonna be wild what you can do on some of these games now, like if you uncap your frame rate. I feel like a lot of speedrunning communities revolved around the PC kind of genre of games, like a lot of first-person shooters and stuff. I think a lot of those games already have things implemented to make it so that everyone's kind of on a fair playing field. The load removal and, auto splitter and making rules to cap frame rate and whatnot. I do think that plays a huge part in a lot of PC speedrunning communities, but I don't know.
Yeah, I
don't know what the 3030 holds for us.
Yeah.
Or the 33,000 series, rather.
Yeah. No, I think those are all kind of fair answers. I'm definitely interested as well in what PS5, PS4 looks like, especially with that SSD, and two with I've seen some of the same stuff with the Xbox backward compatibility. I hope they expand what's available there. Really, I just want more backwards compatibility. So if I get into a game, I would love to just I know having a level playing field for IGT is good, but like also, as a person who has to budget my time, I love it when I look at loading screens less. So, it's...
Agreed.
It's all over there. You've already mentioned one game that you're looking forward to, which, of course, is Resident Evil 8. Any other games that you'd want to highlight as things that you're excited to play in the future?
Ghostwire Tokyo. It looks really interesting. I really look forward to playing that, especially because... I believe, The Evil Within 1 and 2 was this kind of passion project from left over from what, was the Resident Evil 4 5 vibe, but kind of turned into its own thing, and I do like the vibe of those games, but I think Ghostwire Tokyo looks less horror and less action, and it looks kind of more thriller. Yeah, it looks more suspenseful thriller kind of stuff, and it seems like it's got more of an atmosphere, and it's more confusing and makes you think and stuff. I kind of like that in games. I also do look forward to seeing what the next God of War game is. I'm a huge God of War fan, as well as Devil May Cry, so I'd like to see what the next God of War game has in store. I'd like to see a trailer, even if it's short. I would just pop off.
Yeah, just to know that it's coming.
Yeah. But there's a couple of other games too. A couple of like indie games too, like this game called Stray. I remember seeing a trailer for Stray like years ago, or like an announcement for it, and it's just like this cute cat in this robotic world. And it just looks like a cute little fun game to play. A couple of other games too, like what's that game called? Pragmata? Is that the name?
Was that the one with the weird astronaut trailer? Or no, that was...
Yes.
It was,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah, it's by Capcom.
Yeah. It was by Capcom, yeah.
I'm really interested to see if they use the RE engine, and if they do, like, how is this game gonna look on next-gen stuff? Like, it's probably gonna look insane. And it looks really kind of more adventurous. Stuff that Capcom hasn't done in God knows how long. So, I'm very interested in that as well. And then, you know, whatever Kojima does next. Just literally whatever he does. I'll play it.
What I want him to do is predict a good future instead of Death Stranding predicting the future. That would be A+ with me.
I can't believe that happened.
Yeah,
Death
Stranding,
right? Telling the story of the future.
Cool. Great.
Thanks, Kojima.
All right. Well, on that note, on that bright, optimistic note, where can people find you and what you're doing?
I mean, I am a full-time streamer. Like, I do it for a living, thankfully, thanks to, you know, the help of many generous people out there who enjoy what I do. So you can definitely find me on Twitch, Maxylobes. I'm Maxylobes on literally everything. I'm the one and only. So if you want to find me on Twitter, I'm there as well, at Maxylobes. And I do have a YouTube. That's where you can usually find most of, like, my casual playthroughs, as well as, like, some of my world records and PBs and whatnot.
Yeah, and of course, all of those will be linked in the description below, wherever you're listening, as well as, you know, links to some of the individual videos that I watched preparing for this interview. Maxi, thank you so much for giving me all this time and wonderful information.
Yeah, no problem. It was super fun. Thank you for having me, honestly.
But I do need one more thing from you. In order to properly conclude an episode of OverBoost, I'm going to use a catchy, awkward cheese phrase like, let's boost on out of here. And when I do that, I need you to follow it up with your best, like, rocket booster engine noise. Can you do that for me? Okay?
Yeah, I got you.
All right. Folks, thank you so much for listening. Let's boost on out of here.